Welcome to the Costa Rica Travel and Living Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Baker. I'm a British expat that has been living and working here in Costa Rica since 2006 and has since called Costa Rica his home. So I know a thing or two about travel to this part of the world. In this week's episode, my guest, Rosario Gamboa, is Costa Rican Vacations Lead Qualification Manager. She's been living and breathing Costa Rica tourism for the last 5 years, and she originally came here to Costa Rica up from Chile in 2005 with her mum. We have an interesting conversation about the cultural differences growing up here in Costa Rica she experienced as a Latin American expat. Quite fascinating. So, without further ado, let's jump in. Rosario, welcome to the Costa Rica Travel and Living Podcast. Good to have you. How are you?
Hey, thank you for having me, Adam. I'm doing great today. And
Good
you?
stuff. Absolute pleasure. Well, hey, I like to just kind of jump in. And for those of you who are just getting to know you, tell us a little bit about what brought you to Costa Rica initially.
Well, my mom was going through some things in Chile, and she had to work and travel at that time. This was 2005, so it was a big decision for her. It was not this common to have, this type of life now. So what she did is that she came to live to Costa Rica for a few months. She tested it, and after that, she took my sister and I to Costa Rica to live with her here. So it was planned to be for a couple of years, and here I am. That was 2005.
Wow. So you're coming up to 20 years now, nearly in the country.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't feel like that, though.
Was your mum, I know you guys are originally from Santiago in Chile, was she originally looking for work, or what was her reason to come to Costa Rica?
Yeah, she actually got a very good job offer in Costa Rica. She's a publicist. So she started the journey of publicity here in Costa Rica. And it was actually a good idea to do. She actually got to know a lot of publicity in Central America. After that, she went to live to Guatemala. We did. We lived there for 2 years and then came back to Costa Rica.
Ah, fantastic. So you're the first Chilean that I've known here in my time in Costa Rica. Well, how old were you when you moved here?
I was 8 years old. I was a child.
So it's really interesting. That's an interesting topic of conversation. Do you remember those early years, maybe when you were at school and then moving? So first of all, Guatemala and then Costa Rica. I would be super interested to know what it was like growing up in those early years and how it compared to Costa Rica to Guatemala and what you remember from Chile when you were much younger.
Well, that's actually a really good question. I think that my personality has always been related to nature. So my grandmother has this big place in the south of Chile, central south. So I always lived within nature. All my vacations were there. So when I got the notice of coming to Costa Rica, I didn't know what to expect. I was really small. So when we came to Costa Rica, the first idea was 2005. So you don't have enough information like you have now. Yeah. Our first impression was like we were going to arrive to Costa Rica and they were going to receive us with flowers and that type of things. But obviously not in our short information that we had in that moment. That was what we thought about it, but obviously not. Costa Rica was a fully developed country at that time. They had everything that we had in Chile, except for obviously some things of transportation and not that big city that I was living in, but they did have enough to live good life in Costa Rica. So, and within nature, which is, I think, the most important part that we are preserving right now in Costa Rica. Living in a place like this, I think it's what moves you to stay here in such a beautiful country. So compared to Guatemala, that's an interesting question because Costa Rica and Guatemala even though they are pretty near to each other compared to different places in the rest of the world, like United States, which is a really big country, they are pretty near each other, but they are super different. Guatemalan people is super different. Their traditions are different. So at the end, for me, it was a big shock. I didn't do that good with people in Costa Rica when I first came here. I think that Latin American immigrants in Costa Rica were treated a little bit different than the North immigrants in Costa Rica.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think that was a bit of a shock for me. I was never out of Chile, so this was my first experience with other people from other countries. So it was a big shock because Costa Rican tend to be pretty familiar.
Yeah.
They are super central with their family and with their friends. So at the first, it was kind of feeling a little bit alone in Costa Rica, versus Guatemala, where they are super friendly and open to all immigrants. So it was a bit difficult to join Costa Rica at first, but after you understand the culture and you are okay with it, you understand that being alone is not always that bad, and respecting their space is super important. And even though it is that way, Costa Ricans will always make you feel comfortable. Even if you are not that close of a friend to them, they will always make you feel comfortable and make you feel nice, and they will be interested about knowing you and everything else. So I really think that it's a big comparison, that the lifestyle in Guatemala is different because it is obviously more dangerous than living in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
A lot of things happened in Guatemala, which were a reason to come back to Costa Rica for my mom. So yeah, it's difficult to compare. They all have their beauties, but I think I will stay in Costa Rica for sure. I love traveling to Guatemala. I have been there a couple of times after I left, but still, Costa Rica I rooted here, basically.
It's very interesting talking to you and thinking about the fact that you're obviously, like you mentioned, a Latin American immigrant, as opposed to myself, white Caucasian coming from Britain, or many US expats that we talk to on the show from North America and the US. Why do you think, well, in the time now that you've spent nearly 2 decades, you've touched on it there slightly. What do you think is the reason that you felt like that? Maybe because you were younger. Obviously, it's probably your first country. Because obviously, for me, of course, Costa Ricans are very welcoming, very friendly, as are the Guatemalans. I've been there a couple of times myself. And it's an interesting comparison because they are very family-orientated culture. But you said you found it quite difficult to kind of maybe make friends initially, but it was easier in Guatemala.
Well, I think I missed a very important point. When I arrived to Costa Rica, well, first in Chile, my family is a really open-minded family. We are super, for some people, we will be hippies to say. Okay. So just to contrast, when we came to Costa Rica, we entered into Methodist high school. So it was a big contrast from a family that didn't have like a specific religion to enter to mostly an Christian high school.
Yes.
So what happened there is my mom was alone at the time. She was a single mother. So joining a school with a Methodist high school with this normally for willing family, where there is always a dad, a mom, and the kid, and it was a shock for us. So that is, I think, part of what might have been the cause for us being treated a little bit differently.
I understand.
It was also a kind of a very high-end school at the time. And my mom, well, she paid our house, schools, and that was it, right, at that moment. So We were not that wealthy family at the high school, so it might also be another addition to that story.
The challenges you faced.
Yeah.
What would you say? Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No.
What would you say was some of the pros and cons as you were growing up in Costa Rica, especially throughout your teenage years, maybe going through school and college, things you loved and things you found really difficult?
Well, what happened is that I left Chile, and at that time, visiting Chile was really, really expensive. We didn't get the chance to see our family that often. So what happened is that we always felt the need to have our family close to us. Even more with what I just told you, we were feeling a little bit alone. So it was cheaper to bring our family here than us traveling to Chile. Uh-huh. So that made me travel a lot in Costa Rica because we always wanted to show Costa Rica to our families. Yeah. Obviously, you don't bring someone from Chile to Costa Rica just to visit us. We needed to go out to the beach and to the volcano and everything. Yeah. So it was at the end in my roots to always travel in Costa Rica and have this lifestyle where I wanted to be near nature my whole life. So yeah, I think challenging to growing in Costa Rica is where transportation is a bit difficult in Costa Rica when you don't have a car. Yeah. Getting to move here can be difficult because if you have friends from different parts of Costa Rica and you don't have a car, it could be really, really challenging. Even more if you have family, because obviously you get to do family with 20 years in Costa Rica. Yeah. Family is all over the place. Costa Rica has this thing that you always know somebody. For example, you are in San Jose and you go to Limon and you will meet somebody there because Costa Rica is a really small country. Yeah. It's so small that you always get to know someone.
As you're saying it, I'm thinking, Chile is a quite big, very, very long country all the way down the Pacific side of South America. And you talk about Costa Rica as if it's much larger, and it really isn't. It's a tiny landmass, 5 million people. And it's really true. It is that. Well, you could call it that close family spirit, but you can be literally in the capital, go over to the Caribbean side, like you say, and you'll probably see somebody that you knew or
yeah.
It is very true.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Say about needing a car as well. I think that might surprise anybody coming down, whether you're vacationing or you're coming to live here. When you look at the map, the road connections, they're connected, but the roads are never in good condition, and it does take a long time. So I guess patience.
Yeah.
Is the way forward there. What about some things that you really loved? You mentioned the nature. Obviously, that's a big draw. Anything other than that surprised you as you were growing up?
Oh, well, actually, when you start growing up, it was difficult for me with Costa Ricans those first years of my childhood. But once you start to grow up and what I told you, start knowing that is the culture and respecting it and getting to drive with that culture, you get to know that Costa Ricans are just the sweetest persons, and they always will try to make you feel comfortable. It's a big part of their culture. So I think that going through Costa Rica, I studied very far away from my house, from Heredia, where I lived my last years living with my parents. I had to drive 1.5 hours to university every day. Yeah. And in that university, it's University of Costa Rica. You have a lot of people going from different places to that university specifically. So, for example, that university is in Grecia, Alajuela, Costa Rica, and you had people coming from San Ramon, coming from Palmares, from Naranjo, Bajos del Toro, which is a lot. You can say that it is pretty near to each other. All those towns are pretty near to each other, but the driving there is crazy. It's always an hour drive to get there for everyone. So I got to know a lot of different types of Costa Rican people. And I think that is really nourishing for me, at least, because you get to understand a lot of how Costa Ricans work in like a city or centered area, and also in the rural areas of Costa Rica, which is great. And it's another lifestyle. They even, because we live in Costa Rica and we are in a more like active connection with nature, but they live in those rural areas that we go to visit. So their attitude, their vision of life is super different than Central Costa Ricans have of their lifestyle.
I've heard that a lot.
Something you look forward to.
I've heard that a lot over the years that I've been living here, and it's very true. For my first couple of years in Costa Rica, I was living in Monteverde in the cloud forest, and they always say, the people that are living in the built up, central metropolitan area of the Central Valley, very different, living the big work lives, and then you go out into the campo, the hillsides and the nature, and the campesinos. Everything is a lot more relaxed, even slower. Pura vida is really exuded out and about.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, somebody that's been working now for over 3-4 years in tourism, knowing that you love the country, where do you live, and why have you chose to live where you are?
Wow, that is a very good question. I live in the hills of Heredia. It's a place called San José de la Montaña.
I know it. I love it. It's lovely and cool up there.
Yeah, it literally spells to San Jose, which is the main city, but San Jose of the mountain. Yes. So at the end, I chose this place exactly because of that. I am not into that hot weather a lot. I love the beach, but for a short time. I could be there for a week, but not for a month, definitely. So I love the cold weather, and it's something really passionate about living in Costa Rica is that you can find both. And I'm still really near to the center of Heredia, which is like 15 minutes ago from my house. And also I live really near my sister, which is the only family person I have in Costa Rica, my blood to say. She lives in Heredia as well, so I prefer to stay near to her for obvious reasons. I chose, if it wasn't because my sister was living here, I would probably be living in Monteverde, because it's another place that I love a lot. And I think that has the same cold weather that you can find in Heredia. I also have a really nice view of the city. I can see when it's raining on your side of the city. I can see on trouble.
I'm literally looking up the hill at the moment to Heredia, and I can see when the rain is coming.
Yeah, actually, normally it starts raining here in Heredia. So right now it is starting to get dark. So probably in about 15 more minutes it will be raining here, but it will not be raining at your house yet. Probably will start raining at 2 p.m. or something like that.
It is incredible how you can time that. I mean, this year it's been a bit later with the rain, but it's so true. I've been in this area of Western San Jose for about 12 years. I did live actually near Heredia in a town called San Joaquin de Flores, near the airport.
Yeah.
But it was a lot lower. Like where you say, it's a beautiful area. I think you and me are actually in a minority. Most people I talk to will always come to Costa Rica because of the lovely weather and the beach and the sunshine. And I do miss some of the colder English weather, which is, like you say, found up the hill. It's a little bit cooler. Do you see many like expat bubbles in Heredia or the hills around the coffee plantation, San Jose de la Montaña?
Well, I actually don't think so. I live in a independent house. I don't live like in a condo. So I don't have much connection with my neighbors, because it's a really it's like a 2,200 meters area, so like a square area. So I don't have a lot of people to talk to, mostly my animals. But still I know that there are a lot of Chileans actually living in Heredia, and it's a place that Chileans choose a lot to live in. I go back to your point of being a person that lived in a cold weather, because Chile also has the winter, and it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it's why we choose to stay a little bit cool, hot and cool, by choosing where to live. So yeah, I have seen a lot of Chileans. Migrated because of because of Pinochet, of the dictatorship.
Yeah.
So they came to live to Costa Rica. Costa Rica opened the doors to a lot of Chileans at that time, and a lot of them were professors. So they came to work at University of Costa Rica. And actually, I have like 4 Chilean friends in Costa Rica, and most of them and their parents all worked at University of Costa Rica being professors. So
I do find it interesting, different nationalities, how occasionally different bubbles pop up. You know, whether you find a small group of British expats, obviously from the US, you have a lot of expats living here, but also the Europeans as well. And now, obviously, we have a friend from Serbia. There's even a couple of Serbians, and it's interesting to hear that there's a few Chileans there in Heredia, which is a really beautiful place. I know it well. I would highly recommend that. And that is an interesting point that you mentioned. People forget. You see the advertising when it comes to tourism in Costa Rica being affiliated with the volcanoes, the rainforest, the beaches, the lovely weather. But it is a very mountainous country, especially in the central region. You've got amazing landscapes, and it can be a lot cooler. So if you are thinking about living here, you can come and check out some of these different regions. Knowing that you've traveled and you work in tourism for quite a while, and you traveled a lot, and you prepared vacations for your family, what would you say is a premium vacation? Say you're coming for 7 to 8 days. Where would be your best 2 or 3 combo that you would put together you'd recommend?
I think that is the hardest question of all, because for me at least, I wouldn't be able to choose a 7-day vacation in Costa Rica, because I fully loved Peninsula de Osa, and just traveling there requires at least 3 or 4 days of your schedule, and maybe 3 if you're traveling by air. But if you are wanting to really explore and get to know that area, I will say at least 3 days in Peninsula de Osa. But at the same time, if you haven't ever been out of a city, just going to Manuel Antonio makes you feel this amazing space of nature, and really close to San Jose. That will be like another starting point, because I will start by 3 places. If not those 2, I will start maybe by Puerto Viejo. Puerto Viejo, nice. I think, has won my heart multiple times. The only thing is that you cannot predict the weather there. That is
the Caribbean side is more challenging. Yeah,
and I think it's even annoying for some people when they want to get a little sun, and they think that traveling to the Caribbean means immediately that you all are going to see it always sunny. Well, that is not the way. But rainy, it also has its thing.
Appeal.
You can love it being rainy. Obviously, it has its time where it's completely rainy for weeks and weeks. So obviously, that won't be like a first destination if you want to go to the beach. But it is. I will say it is like going to Monteverde with a little bit of rain and the beach. Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting that you mentioned 3 beautiful locations, all of them by the coast. Obviously, the Osa Peninsula is amazing because you get the amazing rainforest. Totally agree. I love it down there. And Manuel Antonio is a classic location for sure. Regarding Puerto Viejo and the southern Caribbean side of Costa Rica, I've seen it develop a lot in maybe the last 10 years. It still has the very, true Afro-Caribbean vibe in the towns of Cahuita and Puerto Viejo. but there are a couple of more interesting boutique hotels that are popping up. Where do you see Puerto Viejo on the Caribbean side, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, yeah, I see a lot of development there. The only issue with Puerto Viejo is that it doesn't have a really good access to water. So it happens a lot where you can see water outrages there. Also with power. So it's not that developed, I think, to be able to sustain that, like those big spots that we see in Guanacaste, for example.
Yeah.
I don't think it will be possible to see a thing like that in Puerto Viejo because of that. But if it is that way, I think it will be, really good because you don't have enough space in Puerto Viejo. That happens a lot. In the high season, it's a place where you can't move freely from one place to another if you are not in a bicycle. If you're in a bicycle, you can move everywhere. But if you are in a car,
limited space.
Yeah, because it doesn't have really good roads. It was never planned to be a big town. I think it was always planned to be more local. So people discovering Puerto Viejo and knowing it is a really nice place, I think it's making it grow faster than what it can sustain. But again, I think it's something that you can't prevent to happen.
And it makes it kind of unique because as you're speaking about that, they're really good points. And also the access. You have one principal road, the famous 32 from San Jose, that always has floods going through the national park. And it's pretty much the only way to get to the Caribbean side. It makes me think of other regions, the same thing for Malpais and Santa Teresa. It's a very unique, difficult road to get to. Some of these places that are more off the beaten path. But we've seen development, with larger houses and hotels on that side. So maybe, I guess, it will happen.
It's actually a double-faced coin, because at the end, what happens there is that you do need the development for it to be developed at the end. If you don't see any growth in the area, you will never see development of the roads. And they will never invest enough to make it better for the people. So I think that at the end, it's all a cycle of where it can find the balance between investing well on the town and the people, and keeping it good for everyone to visit. So I think it's going with a hand with everything. At the end, with tourism, it's difficult to find the level, but it's totally doable.
It's a really good point. I remember when I was living in Monteverde for nearly 2 years, lots of the people in Monteverde like the fact that they feel isolated in their unique little corner of paradise. And one of the advantages is the very difficult road that back in the day, 20 kilometers wasn't paved. So it did take you 4 hours to get up the mountain. But then they wanted more people to visit so that the infrastructure of the area could be developed. But then it was that, like you say, the double-edged coin, or double-edged knife, as we say in English, that you want more people, but then you don't. But then the road needs to get better, but then you don't. So there's always a flip side. It's interesting thinking about that for Puerto Viejo. Let me ask you, what do you miss the most? Obviously, now you're a lot older. You're working in tourism. When you do go back to Chile, what do you miss from back in your original home now that Costa Rica is your new home?
Oh, well, the food.
I was going to say, I can imagine.
Yeah, I love gallo pinto, and I love casado, but you get tired of the arroz with frijoles.
Yes.
So I think that definitely the food. I would love to have my grandma's. She makes Chilean empanadas that are full of meat and different flavors. I think that is the thing. You can find in Costa Rica in the same plates, like it will always be arroz, frijoles, and something that it makes it different totally, because gallo pinto, it's different from casado, like the flavors are different, but it's the same concept. In Chile, you can find different types of food, a lot. You can find, Chile was colonized in big part by Britain, by Spain and Germany. So you have a lot of different mixes of foods there. We have a lot of sandwiches. we have a lot of empanadas and different type of frijoles as well.
Yeah, beans.
But
it's true.
Beans but at the end, it's all mixed with Latin American culture. But keeping it a lot as I think the main impact was Germany with the sandwiches, because Chile has these amazing sandwiches, like the best.
I relate. In the UK, we love our sandwiches. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I come over here and lots of my Costa Rican friends don't understand. Back in when we used to have an office at work, you would bring your sandwiches, your chips, your crisps. People wouldn't understand why you were having such delicious cold bread. And I was like, it is true. Costa Rica has some really nice food, but sometimes it gets a little bit consistent. But saying that, what is your favorite Costa Rica dish that you would always go to?
That one, it's a good question. I am in between tifrijo and de casado.
Okay.
I think that tifrijo it's amazing when it's well done.
Yes.
So that's what makes it tricky. But you can always be sure about the casado, like always. And so you're always feeling comfortable.
You get a good mix, your rice, beans, some delicious meat, salad. Tifrijo, well, we can leave that as a mystery. If anybody wants to find out, we'll put a link in our YouTube channel so you can see more. Maddie, before I leave you, let me ask you one final question. What piece of advice would you give somebody that's thinking about moving to Costa Rica to make the big move?
To travel first, and hopefully a couple of times. Costa Rica has a lot of nice things to give, but if you and something else, never compare Costa Rica to your country or to another country. I think that is a big one, because if you start comparing, you're not going to live happy with Costa Rica. Because we have a lot of nice things here. The nature, being able to live within that, and having everything that you need, like good healthcare, having good access to food, actually, and to all types of supermarkets, good lifestyle. But at the same time, you do have a lot of traffic. You don't have good public transportation. You don't have a really good, how would you say, well, to import things. There are some products that you will never find in Costa Rica that you can find in your country, that it's like a very basic thing to find. So those two things, I think, are the main things to be able to come to live to Costa Rica and feeling comfortable. And I will say that the third one is to learn the language. Costa Ricans talk English really good. I learned English at my school, at my high school. But there are some parts in Costa Rica that will never get to that, to have the opportunity to learn English. And it happens a lot that people that come to live to Costa Rica, what we were talking before, that they tend to go to live at the rural areas. And it could be difficult to get to know directions there, for example, and ask for that to someone. I will think it's really important. So and that and respect always the culture of Costa Ricans. I think that is really nice, in the nature.
I agree. They're very valid points. In those 3 points, you could go into more details, especially with the Spanish, and making sure that you understand again that it's a different country. So come down respecting traveling beforehand, for sure. I would always recommend that for different destinations. Rosario, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure chatting to you. I'll put all the information to your contact in the description box, and hopefully we'll get you back on the podcast very soon.
Thank you for having me, Adam. It was a pleasure for me as well.
Fantastic. Take care, and pura vida.
You too. Pura vida. Bye-bye.
That was a fantastic insight into Rosario's cultural experience for the last 20 years nearly, as she's grown up here in Costa Rica and started a life in tourism in the beautiful hills of Heredia. If you have any questions for me or for Rosario, you can let us know in the comments box below via YouTube. As ever, please don't forget to follow along wherever you get your podcasts to never miss a week's episode. I've been your host, Adam Baker, and until next week, hasta la próxima.